it is time to discuss my favorite, absolute, mind-blowingly favorite thing in gaming. That's right. We're talking about the lore of Halo. I'm really looking forward to this. I love Halo so much. It's very dear to my heart. And I want to share it with you guys. I love it. It's awesome and it's great. So let's jump right into it. Well, you cannot talk about Halo without mentioning Halo's main guy, Spartan 117, the Master Chief, or as I may call him, John. However, you also can't talk about John without mentioning what created him. And what created him? Certainly he's no ordinary human. From the feats we see just in Halo 1, he's an amazing person. But what created him? Well, he was created by something called the Spartan 2 project. Now, there was a Spartan 1 project, however it was called the Orion project, and it was meant to create super soldiers who would be able to withstand harsher conditions, fight harder, last longer, and win. I mean, that was the main goal, and they were to be created to subdue the unrest that was going on in Earth's outer colonies. However, this was scrapped because most of the candidates died, and most of these candidates were military volunteers who decided, hey, I'd like to become super augmented and awesome. Well, most of them died. Interesting to note, however, that Sergeant Johnson was a member of the Orion project. Interesting to know. Anyway, who created the Spartan 2 project, and for what reason? Because you can't really do this kind of thing without a good reason. Well, Dr. Catherine Halsey created this project. And we don't know too much about her background, but we do know that she's pretty good at what she does. Because she was able to get the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, in case I call it that, behind her to do this. And to do that, you've got to be good. ONI doesn't take lightly to this kind of thing. But let's talk about the Spartan 2 project itself. This project was to select 150 children at the age of 6, all of whom to be brought to the planet Reach in order to undergo the training. This program was designed to calm the insurrection that was building up very quickly in Earth's outer colonies. And these soldiers were going to be trained from the best genetic makeup that Earth had. These candidates were very carefully selected, and that's why there were only 150 originally. However, this was narrowed down to 75 due to both budget problems and genetic imperfections that were found within the other 75 candidates. These candidates had to be exceptional with mental superiority and physical capabilities, including reflexes, strength, courage, speed, sorry, lost my train of thought there for a moment, speed, and just what Catherine Halsey would call luck. Now, how did Dr. Catherine Halsey manage to abduct 150 children without anybody noticing? Especially since most of these were taken from the outer colonies, which were already experiencing a lot of dissent and a lot of different, the outer colonies were really upset at the way Earth was governing them. So how was this done? Well, very poorly is all I can say. Basically, the genetic templates were taken from children by vaccinations, right? That doesn't sound suspicious at all. Basically, instead of a vaccination, it was the exact opposite, taking out genetics to study them, or genes from the children to study them, and that was how it was done. Massive project, with only 150 suitable candidates. Now, how is this done? Well, ONI put in some spooks, or some spies, as you may know them, and they kidnapped these children in the middle of the night, or the planet's night cycle. Whatever. Okay. These children, well, how are they not missing? How did no one miss them? Well, they underwent a process known as flash cloning. Now this is the process of taking a part of a person's DNA and regrowing an organ or a limb or something like that. However, these children had their entire bodies flash cloned, and so they were placed back in their beds, asleep. All was normal, right? No. These children all died of natural causes, very soon after they were flash cloned, and the original children were taken away. So, Spartan 2 project can begin. No one else has anything that they can say. Oni knows about it. No one else does. Parents are totally convinced, right? Yes, sadly that is true. Now, let's talk about the Spartan 2 program once the children are there. 75 were brought to the planet of Reach, which is the Earth's main defensive institute in the galaxy, the galaxy basically. 75 of these children were brought, with John, the Master Chief, being number 117. Now, the training. Very strict military training by a man known as Chief Petty Officer Mendez. This man was very rigid, very strict, and yet, at the same time, very brutal. For instance, at the age of 6 on the first day, the children were meant to undergo a very brutal program which involved 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and keep in mind these are 6-year-old children, a 1-mile run, and with no water until the very end. And then, of course, the obstacle course, which formed them into teams that would stay with the Spartans for the rest of their lives. Now, obviously, as they got older, this training increased because they were just 6-year-olds at the time of the starting of this program. Okay. Now, let's talk about this obstacle course and the teams that were formed. John was placed with 2 people, Kurt and Kelly. Kelly ends up becoming the fastest Spartan that lives, and Kurt, well, he's just Kurt. No, actually, the description of Kurt is that he's really very in between. He's not the fastest, but he's not the slowest. He's not the strongest, but he's not the weakest. And John, and we actually get a little peek into his mind in one of the books. I think it's The Fall of Reach. I might be mistaken there. Yeah, but I believe it's The Fall of Reach. John actually thinks to himself, not because he's Kurt's lazy or doesn't have the ability to do these things, but it's because he doesn't want the attention. So it's interesting. So this obstacle course is described as being made up of lots of ropes, pulleys, levers, and lots of different mats that are spread out across this entire obstacle course, and it ascends into the sky like 20 feet. Spartans were split into teams, and their goal was to ring the bell at the top of the tower. Well, this went beautifully for John, Kelly, and Kurt, as they became last. And here's the reason, because John, our beloved hero of the Halo series, did not work with his team. He was inspired to win and get personal glory. Now, we know this because earlier in The Fall of Reach, we have a dialogue with Dr. Catherine Halsey and John when she's checking John out for the Spartan program. She comes to John's house, or not house, sorry. She comes to John's school on Eridanus. Eridanus 2, I believe, is the name of the planet. Eridanus 2, in order to see what he is like in person. Now, she does this with Captain Keyes, who you may know from the first Halo. And he was a lieutenant, I believe, at the time. Or something like that. Okay, enough with Captain Keyes, though. We could do a whole video on this with just him. Let's talk about the interview that John had with Halsey. This interview started when Halsey was observing John fight in a match of King of the Hill. Now, if you don't know what this is, or if you've never played the Halo multiplayer, basically you hold 1 point against everybody else. And John did this very well. He's described as being a head taller than everyone else, with brown hair, brown eyes, a tooth missing, as is common with the little children, and lots of freckles. Now, he's also noted to be stronger, quicker, and better, basically, than all of the other children who are trying to fight him for dominance of this hill, and he ends up winning. Halsey calls him over, and she asks him a few basic questions. You know, what's your name? Who are you? Things like that. But then she offers him a little game. It's a game of coin toss. Now, she says you can keep this coin, and it's an American quarter, by the way. So it's basically an artifact at this point. She says you can keep this coin if you can correctly guess which side it will land on. John agrees. He likes to win. I mean, we see that in his brutality with the King of the Hill, as he said to straight arm people down and grapple them and throw them back down the hill. Okay, so, I'm sorry, something in the background distracted me. Halsey flips the coin, and it begins to spin. John reaches out, grabs it, holds it out, and calls the correct side. I believe the side he calls is Eagle. Halsey stares at him for a moment, wondering if he did this out of skill or luck. Personally, I think it's out of skill, because that just seems, I don't know, that doesn't fit with who I know John as, and I'm going to get into that. So, now that we're done with that little side story, let's get back to what we were actually talking about, this obstacle course. Well, the punishment for failing and being last, the last Spartan team in this obstacle course, was you don't get to eat dinner. And that got John thinking about maybe he should work with his team. And also got his team pretty mad at him. And next day, when they had a rematch, they came in 4th. Much better. I think there were 15 Spartan teams, something like that. I have notes here, but I didn't really write that. Anyway. Now, this shows an interesting split from John's previous behavior. It shows that instead of the King of the Hill attitude, where it's one against all, it's a teamwork, because what we end up seeing here in this obstacle course is that Kelly, who's the fastest, ends up running ahead to get to a little lift that can bring them up to the top of the bell. And John covers her, being the strongest of all three, and he fights back people, kind of King of the Hill style, even though he's not fighting for that reason. Kurt, I think, being the slowest of the group. Those three, by the way. In case you're wondering if I was making a paradox about it from my comment earlier. And then Kurt ends up arriving with John fighting everyone back. They make it to the top, and they're in 4th place. Very cool.